The real reason MacKenzie Scott stayed silent while Bezos moved on. On January 9, 2019, Jeff and MacKenzie Bezos stood together in a joint statement that looked like the model of dignified separation. They called their marriage joyful. They spoke of decades of shared life and a future as friends and co-parents. The world read it and thought, this is how billionaires divorce. Civilized, amicable, mature. 24 hours later, the National Enquirer published explicit text messages between Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez that had been exchanged for months while he was still married. The joyful statement was a shield. And there is one question that no headline has ever really answered. Why did MacKenzie Scott choose to stay completely silent while Jeff Bezos moved on in the loudest, most public way imaginable? Because what she did instead, and what that silence actually meant, is the real story nobody has told. MacKenzie Scott did not marry Jeff Bezos because he was rich. She married him when he was a hedge fund analyst with an idea. It was 1992. Mackenzie Tuttle was a brilliant Princeton graduate who had studied creative writing under Toni Morrison, one of the greatest American novelists of all time. She took a job at the hedge fund D.E. Shaw in New York City. Her desk was next to Jeff Bezos. When it came time for her interview at the firm, she specifically requested him as her interviewer. Within 3 months, they were engaged. 6 months later, they were married in a ceremony that cost almost nothing. This was not a woman chasing wealth. This was two people falling genuinely in love before there was anything to chase. In 1994, Jeff came to MacKenzie with an idea for an online bookstore. She did not just support the dream, she made it possible. MacKenzie drove their beat-up car cross-country from New York to Seattle, while Jeff sat in the passenger seat typing the business plan for what would become Amazon. When they arrived, she became Amazon employee number 1. She handled accounting, she negotiated contracts with freight companies. She packed books in their garage when they could not afford to hire anyone else. They lived in a one-bedroom rental and drove a 1996 Honda Accord that they kept until 2013, long after Jeff was worth billions. For the first decade of Amazon's existence, MacKenzie was not the founder's wife watching from the sidelines. She was the partner who built it with him, and that is the detail that makes everything that came after so devastating. She gave him 25 years, 4 children, and the foundation of one of the most valuable companies in human history. And somewhere in the late 2000s, Jeff Bezos stopped seeing her. Hold on to that detail because it explains everything that comes next. Friends who knew them during the early years say MacKenzie was the one who kept Jeff grounded. When the pressure of running Amazon started to change him, she was there. When the media attention turned him into a public figure, she stayed out of the spotlight and raised their children. She published novels that most people never heard about because her husband's shadow had become so enormous, and Jeff grew more obsessed with his legacy. In the year 2000, he founded Blue Origin, his space company. Suddenly, he was not just dominating commerce on Earth, he wanted to conquer space. The breakfast meetings with his family that he had once protected stopped happening. The warmth between them faded. MacKenzie became quieter, more guarded. She was disappearing inside her own marriage. And by the time Lauren Sanchez entered the picture, MacKenzie had already been invisible for years. Here is where the timeline gets telling. In December 2016, Lauren Sanchez, a former television news anchor and helicopter pilot, was introduced to Jeff Bezos at a party. She was married to Hollywood talent agent Patrick Whitesell at the time. Jeff was still married to MacKenzie. By 2018, Jeff and Lauren were exchanging intimate text messages and private photos. The National Enquirer had been tracking them for 4 months before publishing their story. They had explicit messages. They had evidence. And on January 9, 2019, Jeff and MacKenzie Bezos announced their divorce in that carefully worded joint statement. Exactly 24 hours later, the Enquirer published everything. That timing was not a coincidence. MacKenzie knew the story was coming. She chose to get ahead of it with dignity, instead of being ambushed by tabloid headlines. Think about what that tells you. She had been living with the knowledge of Jeff's betrayal for long enough to consult lawyers, negotiate terms, and draft a public statement. And she still chose not to say a single word against him. The source of those leaked messages was later traced to Lauren Sanchez's own brother, Michael Sanchez, who reportedly sold them to the tabloid for $200,000. Lauren's own family member betrayed her for money. And this is the woman Jeff Bezos chose to replace MacKenzie with. The divorce settlement was historic. $38 billion in Amazon stock, the largest divorce settlement in human history. Under Washington state law, MacKenzie was entitled to half of everything. Half of Amazon, half of one of the largest fortunes ever accumulated. She took a quarter, 25%, and then she did something that nobody in Jeff Bezos' orbit saw coming. She walked away and built a completely different life. Within months of finalizing the divorce, MacKenzie Scott signed the Giving Pledge. This is a public commitment made by billionaires to give away the majority of their wealth in their lifetime. Most people who sign the Giving Pledge spend years setting up foundations with their names on buildings. They hire publicists, they make announcements. MacKenzie did not do any of that. She just started writing checks. $275 million to Planned Parenthood, $436 million to Habitat for Humanity. She gave $2.7 billion to 286 organizations in a single year, then $7.1 billion in 2025 alone. In total, since 2019, MacKenzie Scott has donated over $26 billion to more than 2,700 nonprofit organizations. No publicist, no red carpets, no morning show appearances. She lets the organizations announce her gifts instead of announcing them herself. And here is the part that reveals what she actually experienced in that marriage. Her donations were not random. She gave to organizations supporting people who have been overlooked and marginalized. Women's shelters, education programs for underserved communities, racial justice initiatives, press freedom groups. Every single check was a quiet statement from a woman who understood what it felt like to be invisible. And through all of this, MacKenzie Scott said nothing about Jeff Bezos, not one interview, not one tell-all book, not one cryptic social media post. Her silence was absolute, but silence is not the same as emptiness. Silence can be the loudest response of all. Now let me tell you what Jeff Bezos was doing during that same period. Because the contrast is where the real story lives. While MacKenzie was giving away $7.1 billion in 2025 without telling anyone, Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez were planning their wedding. In June 2025, they held a 3-day wedding celebration in Venice, Italy. According to Italian government officials who had access to the security and logistics costs, the total bill was north of $55 million. Lauren wore 27 designer outfits over the course of the celebration. One custom Dolce & Gabbana gown, another covered in 175,000 hand-sewn crystals and 600 yards of chain. Fashion experts estimated her total wedding wardrobe alone cost over $2 million. The guest list included 200 people, many of them reportedly Lauren's entertainment industry connections rather than Jeff's inner circle. Leonardo DiCaprio, Kim Kardashian, Oprah Winfrey. Entire neighborhoods in Venice were shut down for security. Local Venetians protested the disruption to their city during peak tourist season. And Amazon employees, thousands of whom had been laid off in 2022 and 2023, had watched their former CEO spend $55 million on a party. But here is the detail that tells you everything you need to know about how Jeff Bezos views his second marriage. He had his lawyers draft what sources called a bulletproof prenuptial agreement. The wedding was reportedly delayed because the prenup took so long to finalize. The man who married MacKenzie with no prenup and lost $38 billion was not about to make that mistake again. He trusted MacKenzie completely. Whether he trusts Lauren the same way is something only he knows, but it is hard not to notice the difference. And if you are wondering what that difference says about how Jeff Bezos truly feels about this marriage, you are asking exactly the right question. Meanwhile, MacKenzie Scott did something that almost nobody noticed. In 2021, she quietly remarried. His name was Dan Jewett. He was a science teacher at the private school her children attended. Not a billionaire, not a celebrity, not someone chasing the spotlight, a teacher. They announced their marriage through a brief addition to MacKenzie's Giving Pledge letter, where Dan added his own signature and a few humble lines about being grateful to join her mission. And then, barely 2 years later, they quietly divorced, with everything finalized in early 2023. No announcement, no tabloid drama, no tell-all interviews. MacKenzie simply removed his name from her Philanthropy website and moved forward. Do you see what she was showing you? Even in her personal life after Jeff, she chose privacy over spectacle. She married someone who shared her values, and when it did not work, she ended it with the same dignity she had shown throughout her entire public life. She changed her name, not back to her maiden name Tuttle and not to Jewett. She chose MacKenzie Scott, using her middle name. She was creating an identity that belonged to no father, no ex-husband, no second husband. She was finally becoming herself. And that brings me to the part of this story that I think is the most devastating. Because MacKenzie Scott's silence was never about bitterness. It was never about weakness. It was never about being too hurt to speak. MacKenzie stayed silent because she understood something about Jeff Bezos that he probably did not understand about himself. She has never spelled it out publicly, and she probably never will. So this is my read, and I will own it. I think she knew that the man she fell in love with had disappeared long before Lauren Sanchez ever entered the picture. Somewhere in those years, Jeff had become a man who needed to be seen, not respected, not loved, seen. The Jeff who used to protect family breakfast time and help with the dishes was gone, and in his place was a man who had stopped wanting a partner and started wanting an audience. If that is true, then the affair was not the cause of their marriage ending. It was the confirmation of what had already happened. Jeff had slowly erased MacKenzie from their partnership until she became invisible in her own life. And when she finally left, he replaced her with someone who would never challenge him the way she did. You know, there is something about a woman who keeps going quietly, who keeps showing up, who never uses her pain as a weapon, that does not always get the recognition it deserves. MacKenzie Scott is that woman. Through every single moment of the last 6 years, she has never said one word against the man who betrayed her. She did not have to. Jeff Bezos' own choices have been saying it for her. And that brings us back to the question we started with, because now you can see the full shape of the answer. Her silence was never weakness. It was the last word in an argument Jeff did not even know they were having. Every check she writes without a press conference is a sentence in that argument. Every building that will never carry her name, every family that gets help without ever learning who sent it. She is saying, this is what the money was for. This is what we could have been. And she is saying it at a scale no interview could ever match. More than $26 billion and counting, given to people the world overlooked the same way she was overlooked. Today, she is no longer known primarily as Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. If anything, he is increasingly known as her ex-husband. While he builds rockets to escape Earth, she is quietly using her wealth to heal it. The loudest man in the world finally got his audience. The quietest woman in the world became impossible to ignore, and she never had to say a single word. And if this story stayed with you, there is another woman who walked a very similar road, Melinda Gates. Same kind of loyalty, same quiet devastation, same choice to rebuild through purposeful giving instead of public bitterness. Her story is linked at the end, and I think you will see the parallels.